The Boy That Roared Like a Lion by Grumps. Conker was a sweet but sometimes mischievous little boy with bright chestnut red hair. This apparently is how he got the name of Conker. Sometimes his parents tell him it's because he's a bonker conker. This makes him laugh. One day, Conker was watching a wildlife programme on the television when suddenly his eyes widened as a fierce prowling lion with a long dark mane and piercing eyes came onto the screen. The sight mesmerised Conker. He stopped eating the cheese and ham sandwich he had in his hand and watched in silence. His jaw dropped open when all of a sudden the lion turned and seemed to face the screen. Without any warning, the lion gave out a deafening roar. Conker jumped out of his skin. This was amazing! He had never seen or heard anything like it before. He turned to his mummy and tried to give a bellowing roar. She chuckled at his attempt and told him he would have to practice if he wanted to be able to roar like a lion. Conker was disappointed that he hadn't been able to scare his mummy, but decided that he would practice and that one day he would roar like a real lion. Conker sat roaring at the television whilst eating the rest of his lunch. When the programme had finished, he decided to wander around the house looking for objects and things to roar at. He first thought about roaring at the big old grandfather clock in the hall. Then he stood next to it and gradually leaned his head back and looked skywards up the case until he saw the clock face. Perhaps a bit too ambitious to start with. I'll give that a go later this afternoon, he was thinking when his eyes fixed on a small glass vase with a single flower in it. Perfect! Conker stood in front of the glass vase and roared. The petals didn't even flutter. Oh, thought Conker, perhaps I'm too far away. He stepped right up to the cabinet the vase was on and once again roared. Roar! Again, the flower didn't look very scared. He looked at the vase and flower for quite a while and then thought about the lion on the television. This time Conker narrowed his eyes, took in a big, deep breath, held it and told himself, "You are a frightening, scary lion." Upon that, he unleashed a mighty lion roar. Roar! This time the petals scattered from the stalk. The little glass vase rocked and finally tumbled over, spilling water all over the wooden cabinet. Conker opened his eyes, looked in disbelief, then smiled. "I am a lion," he thought. "I'm a lion," he told his mummy, while he was being told off for spilling the water and ruining the flower. What next? After his first success, Conker rapidly roared his way around much of the house. Just behind where the vase had sat was Bobbin, the family goldfish, in his large, round glass bowl. A real lion would be able to scare a goldfish, and the bowl was so big it wouldn't tip over, thought Conker. Bobbin was happily swimming in circles until the roar of a small lion struck him. He momentarily stopped, then carried on swimming in circles. A little disappointing, thought Conker, but that must be how goldfish show that they are scared. For the rest of the afternoon, Conker roared at Gertie, the family dog. Roar! She took fright and howled so loud that the whole house shook, including Conker. This would normally have woken up Daddy, who was dozing outside in the sun, had it not been for a roaring lion waking him out of his slumbers. Roar! Unfortunately for her, Mabel, Conker's sister, was next. Roar! Her piglets shot straight out and she let out an almighty scream. What a good day's start of roaring like a lion, thought Conker. Conker so wanted to see a real lion. One day his mummy and daddy told him that some lions live in a zoo and that they had one not too far from where they live. This made Conker very excited. He told them that he must see the lions. Well, said Daddy, it's your birthday soon. Why don't we go to the zoo for it? Yes, please! The night before his birthday, Conker couldn't sleep. He kept practicing his roars on Mabel. Mummy told him his throat would be too sore to roar with the lions if he didn't stop. The next day did come along with a picnic, and they all headed off to the zoo. Whilst going around, they saw rhinos, snakes, spiders, and sea lions, but Conker didn't roar at any of them. This confused his parents, but Conker knew he was saving his biggest roar. They visited gorillas, giraffes, hippos, and still no roar. Then they came upon the cage that had a sign that read, "This is the lion enclosure. In here are the kings of savannah. Do not feed, or put your hands anywhere near the bars." Conker's parents took him close up to the bars of the lion's enclosure, but not too close. He looked at all the lions and felt a little let down. They didn't move very much. They sometimes swished their tails to get rid of annoying flies, but generally they did very little. The male lions, in particular, seemed to be asleep. Conker thought for a moment and decided this wasn't going to stop him roaring. After all, it was his birthday. He closed his eyes and imagined he was with the lions on the television. He took a very deep breath, leaned his head back, then roar! It was a mighty roar, the best roar he had ever done. He slowly opened his eyes, and to his amazement, nothing. Not even a swish of a tail, until one of the male lions gradually opened an eye to see what or who had disturbed his sleep. He opened his other eye and gradually got up from his slumber to show his full height and size. This was a big, very big, no, very, very big, fierce-looking lion with a long dark mane and piercing eyes. He looked towards Conker and strutted right up to the bars of his enclosure. Conker gulped and took a step back. The lion now had his face firmly pressed up at the bars and his eyes firmly fixed on that little, very little, no, very, very little boy called Conker. Both stood still, in silence, for what seemed a very, very long time, and just as Conker was about to blink, the lion narrowed his eyes and took a slow, deliberate breath in, closed his eyes, and roared. Roar! It was terrifying. Conker was frozen to the spot. The roar went on and on like a wet, warm, stormy gale that smelt of rotting meat onto Conker's face. On and on with the loudness of a jet plane taking off from a runway right in front of him. On and on and on. Finally, there was a still silence, with a ringing left in everyone's ears. All the people around Conker stared open-mouthed at him and the lion. Mabel stared open-mouthed, but most of all, Mummy and Daddy stared open-mouthed. They all stared, waiting for their little boy to scream with fright and sob uncontrollably, but, amazingly, he just stared at the lion and the lion stared at him, and suddenly They both burst into roars of laughter. They looked at each other again. This time the lion gave a gentle little roar and Conker joined in. Roar! They both smiled, and Conker even thought that the lion had winked at him before he turned and walked back to his original spot, lay down and closed his eyes in the heat of the midday sun. Conker smiled and kept chuckling to himself all the way home and through his tea and up to bed. This truly had been the best day of Conker's life. Until Conker learned how to